Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I hope you've been having a good couple of days so far. I know this is the last session for the Georges conference. I hope it's been fruitful to everybody. Like Sam said, I'm Hanaa Tameez. I am a staff writer for the Nieman Journalism Lab here at the Nieman Foundation, where I cover basically like the future of news and like what journalism looks like in the age of the internet and how it survives and thrives in the age of the internet. So it's really exciting for me to be sharing this particular event with you guys because I really look to student journalism to see how the next generation of journalists is thinking about communicating information with their audiences. So I'm not going to take up too much time. I'm going to turn it over to Hannah Kiros from the Harvard Crimson.
Hi, everyone. Really excited to share um, my work with you today. And hopefully, does everything look good on your end?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to be talking. So first off, I'm the editorial chair of the Harvard Crimson, alongside my better half, Chloe Shawa, who's my co-chair. Basically, what that means is we oversee the publication of about 15 pieces of opinion content a week. Schedule, manage all of that with a lot of help from our really incredible opinion execs. And yeah, I'll be talking about a journalistic project that I'm really proud of that we produced on March 10th, 2021. So just for context, on March 10th, 2020, Harvard students found out that they had 5 days to evacuate the campus due to COVID-19. We found out at 9 a.m. Through like a very confusing email. A follow-up email was the one that really clarified that we had to go. And like I said, so we had until March 15th to leave. And on that day, the Crimson Editorial Board, which meets 3 days a week, it was a Tuesday, which is a day we normally meet. And people were figuring out like, how are we going to get home? Like, what does this mean? Like, how do I store my stuff? But we still committed to meeting that day and actually turning around a piece that night. It was a very like, joyful, stressful, chaotic meeting, but I'm really happy that we chose to meet. And so the piece we published that day was called March 10th, 2020, Harvard Stops, but the World Cannot. I was very proud of our lead for this one. We pulled out a quote from Harvard's dean of students who said, "Harvard will close only for an act of God, such as the end of the world." And here we are. If not at the end of the world, we find ourselves at the end of our physical time on campus. So we published that piece, and then after that, we decided to publish notes from day 2, how not to shut down, a piece where we were talking about just a lot of the chaos and confusion that Harvard's announcement caused, especially among international students and like low-income students who were really left, scrambling. And more supports emerged, but during the first few days, criticizing some of the confusion there. And the notes from day 3, Classmates Out of Place, where we talked about like the mythic humanness that consumed campus in our last few days. And then this is just a news headline that speaks to, the move out challenges that this period caused. So 1 year later, the Crimson decided to publish a commemorative issue on what the past, the COVID year has meant to us. And the opinion section decided to make a reprise of our notes from day 2, notes from day 3. And we called the piece Notes from Day 365, Requiem for a Lost Year. And when we were having our editorial meeting, when we were deciding like what we wanted to publish to commemorate a year from the day that we got our eviction notice from campus, we all realized that we had about a week of spring break after March 10th, 2020, but much of our time during COVID was spent figuring out virtual classes, like figuring out how to make the most of a bad situation, trying to find a virtual internship if like our in-person internship was canceled. And we all found that we really never had time to mourn the things that we had lost, but also like what we called in the piece phantom losses. So, the people that we could have, met in the year that we were doing school remotely, the friends that we were just making, in March 2020, and how those friendships may have faded away. And, just a lot of the spontaneous, like bumping into people in dining halls and just, lecture halls like filled with exuberance. So we took this piece, Notes from Day 365, to really just talk about like the loss of the year, because we felt that we really hadn't had space to do that. And it's a piece I'm very proud of. I got a couple texts from friends saying like it made me cry, which I thought was a good thing. And yeah, so it was a longer staff editorial than we usually publish. I pulled some quotes. Yeah, but so we wrote briefly during our editorial meeting. There was some tension between, like, oh, like I think we've really grown. Like, a lot of people said that COVID had really forced them to grow. And I think I guess the center of the piece was that like growth does not redeem tragedy. And like there were, that we're fundamentally different people because of the pandemic in many ways. And, maybe those ways are good. But yeah, so I just thought that sentence, still growth does not redeem tragedy, was something to pull out. And I also, I'm a big fan of short sentences. So I like this one: return will not be repair. So we really reflected on the fact that out of the 4 classes that left campus when we were evicted, evicted, it sounds negative. I think Harvard made the right decision. But only 2 of those classes will end up returning, in fall 2021. And yeah, and to a campus full of strangers, to a lot of people that we don't know. And we also reflected a bit on the piece about how a lot of torch passing and a lot of closure, like, graduations, like club initiations, how that just has really not occurred. And yeah, so that, like what I was saying, to grieve the big and small is essentially what we took time in the piece to do. To talk about small details that simply slipped away under shattering upheaval. And just another thing that we included in our, our March 10th commemorative package was a piece called When We Learned We Had to Leave, where essentially what we did is we allowed other people into the paper. So we solicited from different people 100-word snippets on like what the day itself was like for them, like when they got the email that they found, that told us we'd be leaving Harvard's campus. Just asking people to tell us what that time was like for them outside of the paper. And I was excited to invite more people in that weren't on the editorial board. So these are just some of the ones that we got very quickly. My boyfriend cried in my lap and then broke up with me. I thought was so funny. Poor awful for her, but we just got, I liked that someone just decided to share that with us. So a senior saying, I wonder if I'd been more pessimistic then, would I have more closure now? A senior that's graduating this year who thought she would be able to reunite in person with her friends. And just we received a lot of really wonderful submissions, and I was really happy about that. But yeah, that's, the centerpiece of this was Requiem for a Lost Year, but also, this is also just a party that happened when people found out they had to leave. So we wanted to create a time capsule to like, to commemorate everything that we've lost, but also to capture this very strange moment in our lives that was a catalyst for a lot of change. And yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah. That is so interesting. The next presentation we have is from Bates College, the Bates Student publication with Vanessa Paolella. Vanessa, are you here?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. Yeah, so my name is Vanessa. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Bates Student, which is Bates College's paper. And so I have a couple slides for you. Let's see if sharing works. So I want to talk about how we moved from a print first model to a digital first model. So a little bit of background about us. Bates College is a small private liberal arts college in Maine. We have about 1,800 students, so very different from you guys who come from really large schools. We don't have a journalism program either, so our paper is the best way to be involved in journalism and learn more at Bates. We're almost 150 years old. We are a weekly newspaper, and we have been for about the past 100 years. We have an underpaid staff of about 25 members, and we are college funded, so we don't generally stress about making our own money, thankfully. So to the left, I have a little bit of our timeline. Our switch to digital has been really rapid. I'm sure many of you guys have felt that as well. When I was a freshman here, we had a weekly print publication, but we had numerous challenges, which made it really difficult. People didn't read the print paper, and with increasing publishing costs, we were often on a tight budget. We weren't able to pay staff very well. We're still not, while putting out a paper every week. Bates has an accelerated semester, which means that people's schoolwork is a little more heavy than the general 15-week model. We have low recruitment, and at the time we had really minimal digital presence. I'm not sure if I ever checked out the website when I was a freshman. And kind of through the years, we started to see this transition where in 2018 to 2020, we were doing a bi-weekly print publication. And that was mostly because of costs and in an effort to improve the quality of the articles in our newspaper. When the pandemic hit in 2020, this really just rapidly changed our process. I had been thinking about how do we improve our print publication, and suddenly I had to realize that digital was the only way we were going to reach people. And so March 2020, we really focused on our digital presence like never before. We adopted Slack as our work method. Before we had been mostly very casual with email and text. And we invested in a website, which was probably the best thing we've done. It was something we had been considering, but when the pandemic happened, we just realized like we really needed a website that worked well, because that was how people were seeing us now. And so we ended up partnering with Snow, which prioritizes with high school newspapers, but also has been expanding to college publications. And for us, it was a cost of $1,000 upfront and $700 annually. We adopted a newsletter as our main form of publication starting in March 2020. That was just how we had to do it. And we used MailChimp. We sent it out to faculty and staff through listservs, but we had to get students and other members of the faculty or other members of the Bates community to opt in. After March 2020, it became and continued to be our main method of distribution. And for the first time ever, the Bates student worked through the summer. So yeah, and we've also really pushed our social media presence, our Instagram and our Twitter. We're still locked out of the Facebook. But those have both been incredibly important. So with our focus on digital, we were able to really put a lot into breaking news, which especially this year has been incredibly important as things are changing by the minute. Right now, Bates is actually in lockdown. Students are not supposed to really leave our rooms except to just sit outside. And so we've been doing a lot this week to just update people about how the quarantine's been extended again and cases are down, thankfully. And so we've been really big about that with our Instagram and Twitter. And so many students aren't necessarily signed up for our newsletter, but they interact with us and they engage with us through our social media because we are so fast about putting things up. In fact, even staff and faculty members tell us that they look at their social media during the day and they learn what's happening from us because they hear it from us first, even before the administration sends out emails. And so, yeah, Instagram stories and Twitter have been really big for our breaking news. We also will highlight stories with our posts. And we've gotten really good engagement just from an active presence and from really pushing that because most students are on Instagram at this point. Yeah, so some of my takeaways from this really rapid this process was by focusing on our digital, we have more money to pay staff, and that hasn't exactly translated to more money per staff member, but we were able to expand staff a little bit in order to kind of plan for what we were assuming was going to be a really weird year. And so that was really, really good for us. With focusing on our digital, we got much higher engagement. Like, I've never heard as many people tell me that they've read the articles our newspaper publishes as this year, particularly faculty and staff. And we have also old alums from like the 80s who will comment on our stuff. And so it's really become more of like a community building publication than it was when we were staying strictly to print. And I don't think it's dramatic to say that this has revived our publication. We don't stress about filling space in a newspaper anymore. Before it was, hey, you really need to get this article in because I need to fill that half of the page. And sometimes the articles would be really shoddy because we were pushing people to do something that they needed another week for. And when we have our digital platform, we're able to just say, hey, yeah, take another week on it, like reach out to more contacts, like study for your test, whatever the case. And it's really improved the quality of our articles, both in our breaking news coverage and our long form, which has been super cool because we're able to give more time for some of those projects. But we're also able to get out breaking news like that night. It's also allowed us to put more interactive resources out there. So one of our digital editors, Max Devon, created this map to the right, which is really simple, but you can click any of the pointers and it will give you the website and some information for how to sign up for a vaccine at that site. And so we've just been able to do so much more to help the community with our digital first platform than we ever could as a print journal. And I'm just incredibly lucky, I think, to have really been able to see that transition that Bates has undergone. So yeah, thank you guys all for listening.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. That's amazing. I think it's really, I feel like that is like the ultimate service journalism right now, of showing people where they can get a vaccine and how. So that's awesome. The next presentation we have is about the Cal State Student Newswire from Cal State with Aidan McGloin and Madalyn Amato.
Great to see you again, Hana.
You too.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Okay, well, thanks for inviting me to this. I just dropped the link to the Substack in the chat along with the link to the Twitter, so you can go ahead and check that out while I'm talking, in case you don't want to look at me. So yeah, I run the Cal State Student Wire. I created it, I founded it last year. I went to college in the California State University system, which has 23 campuses, 484,000 students. So there's a lot of stories that I would do in my 4 years at my student paper that could have been republished at other student papers and would have been just as good, would have reached a broader audience. But then it just wouldn't be because there wasn't a good way of communication between me and the other student newspapers. There'd also be things where I'd need certain assets, like I'd need photos of a board of trustees meeting, but I can't do that because I'm so far away. The Daily 49er is like right next door to that, so they can go in and grab a photo, things like that. But I tried texting people and emailing people, started my junior year, and then that didn't really amount to anything. So what really helped was there was a lot of in-person buy-in that I got from the Associated Collegiate Press convention in San Francisco last year. So I rounded up about 6 student papers, among them me from FT News, and then the Daily 49er, which Madalyn is here repping today. And that's how we kind of got the initial buy-in and got this product started. It wouldn't have been able to happen without this conference that we all met at. The whole thing is kind of run on Substack. I intended it at first to be a closed system where only student papers could kind of look at it. Since then, it's kind of open for everybody, and that's actually really good for momentum building. As far as the workflow goes, if a student paper has a story that they want us to be published, they add it to a certain channel in our Slack. I just open up the link, copy and paste it all into the Substack, schedule it to be sent out the next morning. And then I also copy the post URL, which is like pre-generated in Substack, and I schedule the tweets at the same time. So tweets and the email are scheduled to be sent at the same time so that I don't have to, run around, no, it just published, I need to send out the link for it now. So it's very easy, which is really good because for me, I graduated, don't have that much time anymore, but I'm able to keep the momentum of it running and then can allow a lot more collaboration to happen from journalist to journalist or newsroom to newsroom. I've occasionally hosted Zoom meetings in order to like have us all work together. That hasn't actually been working out that much because people have been tired of Zoom. So I'm continually adapting, and then we're doing most of the conversation in our Slack group now. But I've also been doing things like scheduling press briefings with the CSU chancellor, selecting questions from the CSU student papers, so that another newsroom that we work with, Cal Matches, which is a statewide nonprofit newsroom, they can ask people at the CSU administration that. I also find stories every now and then for people in the wire. People in the wire share stories among themselves. So there's a decent amount of what I do, but there's also a lot that other people are able to do because of this. There's a lot of professional training that people have access to now because they are in this CSU Wire chat. So like I said, CalMative, they have about weekly trainings for college journalists that they drop in this chat. So that's a great access for them. And there's really a big part of what I'm trying to do is to leave a lot of room for innovation from the student journalists themselves. And there's been a lot of that. Madalyn's probably going to talk about that, but there's been a good amount of collaborations that they've been going on that have been mostly self-generated without my involvement as much. And there's some good things that we have planned for in the future. I'm trying right now to open up a syndication channel so that professional newsrooms can buy the content we publish it themselves, and that money would go back to help the ailing budgets of the college newsrooms themselves. So that's kind of really quickly the rundown and everything. But Madalyn, you have it from the perspective of an active editor-in-chief. I don't, so you can take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Aidan. So like he mentioned, the editor before me was actually integral in getting the program started. But I was the first editor that was really on the team as far as production goes. So it's definitely been a lot of trial and error and a lot of definitely a learning curve. But hearing other people speak and in other conferences, it's okay, how we're doing our job is changing, but our job itself is not. We still have a duty and responsibility to communicate information to our communities. How are we going to do that from our bedrooms? And so, with that, there's been all kinds of, mountains of challenges that have come along with it. And for me personally, being able to be part of the CSU Wire has helped to alleviate a lot of stress. I don't know, how other systems work, but I think it's a general rule of thumb that, reporting on a governmental body meeting is like watching paint dry. Nobody wants to do it. And so instead of subjecting all 23 newspapers to doing it, someone draws the short straw and covers the board of trustees meeting for everyone, and then we all just share. So that's definitely been a great help. And there's this kind of very interesting culture in journalism that I think is changing, and I think it's for the best, of like this really dug in competition of us versus them on other publications. And I think we're all realizing, at least I hope, but, and I think the CSU Wires is helping to realize that that does not work. We are students, we're all underpaid, if paid at all. And, we need to help one another out, because at the end of the day, it only matters that we're getting the information out to the people. And so with the CSU Wire, we've been able to do that, and we've been able to get really cool stories out. I always say that, student journalists are journalists, but something that we do better than anyone else is cover higher education, because we're in it and we deal with it every single day. And so we have, a very unique perspective on these particular topics. And, being in the CSU Wire, I've been able to make professional connections, personal connections, get editorial experience editing other schools' papers and seeing, what they're publishing. So it's just been a really great opportunity. It's been a unique opportunity, doing it all virtually, but that's just the nature of the game that we're in now. And I think it's really the future of at least student journalism.
Thank you so much, Aidan and Madalyn. This is like one of those things that to me, like I also went to a state school and I just wish that we were smart enough at the time to like collaborate with like the other SUNY schools. I went to school in New York. So this is definitely an idea that I've passed along as like an annoying alum to like my college newspaper. Like you should talk to them.
You know, you probably would have done it if you had the easy tech like Substack that's just totally free. Like,
Yeah.
you probably would have done it.
Yeah, I wish. So, okay, we're going to go on to the next presentation, which is from Florida A&M from the FAMUAN with Arian Daly.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Okay, I'm about to share my screen. Okay, boom. Can everyone see this PDF?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hello everyone. My name is Arian Daly. I'm the editor-in-chief for the FAMUAN at Florida A&M University. We are one of two publications at our university. We cover the student body, we cover Tallahassee and the community, and we cover stories from all sides. And so today I'll be presenting to you our special edition. It's my baby. I have it right here still. This is from 2020. But this is a special edition that we did. The idea came up in 2019 where basically I was the managing editor and I worked very closely with our EIC at the time. And I told her, I was like, I really want to do something special, like something that's going to be character driven. I want to put people in the room and I want to tell them about real issues. And so we talked about it. And then I was like, guns. I was like, we got to do something on guns because guns is not only a national problem, but in a few minutes, you're about to find out it's a very big problem in Tallahassee, the capital of Florida, especially for the size that Tallahassee is. Guns are a huge issue. And so we worked on it for about 2 months. And during that time, I was also transitioning to become editor in chief. So this is my very first piece. This is my baby. This is my child as the official editor in chief. And so, yeah, like I said, this is about guns. And the main idea of this was to cover guns from a different perspective. Florida A&M University is an HBCU. And so as a Black storyteller, as a Black journalist, it's very important that we are able to share these stories from our point of view, because a lot of times Black people are exploited. They're just used and seen as victims in these type of stories. And that's not what I wanted to do at all. That's not what our staff wanted to do. We just wanted to put people in the room so you can see what's actually going on, because we can talk about numbers all day, but people love people. We want to be able to connect people with characters, and we want to do character driven stories. And so you'll see that here. So our cover page is really cool. Our contents page is like a gun being kind of like torn apart, and it has like the different sides and different areas and different perspectives of guns. And as you can see, it's a ongoing crisis for sure. And right here, Tallahassee is the capital of Florida. So it's very important that we talk about the legality issues, the legal issues when it comes to guns. And so, you know, Florida is a very interesting state when it comes to politics, especially guns. And so you were able to, if you take a look at the story here, you were able to see how they handle it in different areas of Florida. You know, we have some people that are pro-gun and we have some people that are anti-gun. But either way, we have some gun laws that need work. And so this is my own story that I did about a young man named Bernard Thomas III. And this is one of my favorite stories because I sat with him for about 6 hours. And he told me so much about his life. He's from Jacksonville, and guns have affected literally every single aspect of his life. And he shared so much personal information with me, and it moved me so much. And my favorite part about this story is that he told me, he was like, I only ask you for one thing. I ask that you don't exploit me, because he's from Jacksonville, Florida, and they have many gun issues as well. And he has said he had been exploited by reporters in the past. And so some of the information he told me was in confidence, and he asked that I don't put it in the story, but I'm so proud of it because I still was able to put people in the room with him and give them an insight on what his life is like as a Black man dealing with guns. While not making him a victim. There's definitely a success story there, and he's definitely a role model, and he's even creating his own nonprofit to help combat guns and poverty and violence for young Black youth. So really proud of that story. I always tell people about that one. And then things get a little intense. Jamie Johnson was a student at Florida A&M University who was killed by a Jacksonville police officer. He was very well known by the student body, and it was one of the stories that really shook us. This happened during the 2019 Christmas break, and it's a very, very intense story, and it's something that shakes us to our core. And because it's an intense story, you only saw him on the news as a gun violence victim, as someone who was just killed by the police, but he was so much more than that. And I think that's why it's so important that as Black journalists, we're able to tell those stories from a different perspective. And so I was glad we were able to do that. This is a double byline by two very successful journalists at the School of Journalism and Graphic Communications at Florida A&M. And then we also have more success stories. Philip Agnew is an advocate for not only Black youth, but gun violence, police brutality. And he had a lot to do with Trayvon Martin's case, and he even worked for the president. So we have something really cool there. And then we have another character-driven story, something that's also very intense. These two young men, one is from Miami, one is from Atlanta. And this story really focuses on gun statistics as well and how Black men deal with it, because you have to understand that, you know, people go through gun violence. Black men have to deal with gun violence, but you have to really know what's actually going on to understand where they're coming from and their background and how things work and how they're seen and how they deal with it. Because one of these young men actually had to watch their best friend die in front of them in Miami. And so it's very tragic, but we also, the point of this story was we wanted to show people what we're dealing with and why you just need to see what's really going on and why, you know, we act this way or why they act this way or what they're going through. So yeah, so this is just something I'm really proud of. It does get intense. But there are definitely some success stories. And not only do we provide stories with people, but we also provide solutions on how to deal with it. And so I'll go down here how we're trying to work with our Tallahassee Police Department. And there's this last story is really cool. There's a local gun club that tries to promote safety and education for people in Tallahassee, because there's also a safe way to have guns and handle them. And you don't always have to be a victim. You don't always have to be an aggressor. And so it's just really important that we provided a variety of stories. And again, it's something I'm so proud of. And I felt like we did a really good job as Black journalists showcasing some of the things that we go through and really shining a light on these very powerful characters, because I think reading stories like this will make you think twice before you judge someone. And then it'll also make you realize, whoa, like we have a lot of work to do as a society. Like some things have to change. And so, yeah, so that's it for Florida A&M University. You can follow our publication on Instagram at the FAMUAN, as well as Twitter at TFAMUAN. And thank you so much for letting me present. This is one of my favorite pieces of work. I'm very sensitive about it. And thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Ariane. I'm like floored. That sounds like an amazing project, and I think that we'll save us for the questions at the end, but I would be really curious to know what the feedback was like and what the reception was like on campus.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and in the surrounding community. Our next presentation is from UMass Amherst, from the Massachusetts Daily Collegian, with Cassie McGrath.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but I just want to start by saying it's just an honor to present alongside all of the amazing journalists who have spoken and will speak. It's just so fabulous and just amazing to hear about the work that you're all doing. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So I'm reporting on a report we did at the paper called What Went Wrong, which is about the COVID-19 outbreak that happened on the UMass campus at the beginning of this semester. So the Massachusetts Daily Collegian is the paper I work for. We are the only student-run publication on the UMass Amherst campus, and we are the primary source of news for the student body, specifically in breaking news and COVID coverage that I'm going to talk about today. So who am I? I'm the news editor at the paper. And coming into the position last spring, I decided to restructure the section into a beat system where we cover specific topics to just make our reporting more aggressive. And I think that really laid some of the groundwork for what made our reporting so successful here. So that goes into our team. So I worked alongside 3 other really amazing journalists and friends. Will Ketcher is one of my assistant news editors, and he runs the COVID-19 beat. So since the summer, this was an issue we were talking about. And I think it's important to note that as student journalists, we live in the news that we create or write about or report on. So it was kind of at the beginning of the semester, we knew something was happening and so much was happening at once. Will and I have really grounded each other, and then bringing in staff writer Sophie, who works on the COVID beat, and Lee, who works on the administrative beat, to really make sure our reporting was well-rounded. So some background on the outbreak. There were 758 cases in the first 2 weeks that we came back. UMass is a pretty big school, but 758 cases was very scary. And within the next week, it hit almost 1,000 cases in 3 weeks. And we came back on February 1st, so it was pretty immediate. Like, we started classes and the outbreak was happening even before classes started because students returned to campus before then. Laying some foundation for the outbreak, when students came back, as I said, it was 5,300 students. And the previous semester, only students who absolutely needed to be on campus were allowed to live on campus. So you had an in-person class or personal reasons, but in the spring semester, they decided to bring back any first-year student or recent transfer who wanted to live on campus. So that huge increase of people, alongside the fact that there wasn't a lot of security when the students moved in. They were supposed to get tested and kind of stay in isolation, then 4 days later get tested again. But students who hadn't been around anyone for a full year, or it was their first time in college with no supervision, kind of just took advantage of that and just were really not following any of the rules. And the kind of most flagrant example of that was a pretty big fraternity party that took place the weekend before classes even started. And fraternity parties continued to take place even after that one. So there were 354 students facing conduct violations, and we moved into a self-sequester period where people were not allowed to leave their rooms for really anything besides food or like medical emergencies. There's like the UMass wasn't even allowing people to go on walks at first outside. It was very strict. So we moved to this high elevated risk. So it became pretty clear to us at the beginning that there were 3 stories here. We're going to need to break it into a series. I think at first it was kind of overwhelming because we were like, okay, there's an article going on here, but we needed to break it up in order to really tell the full truth of what was going on. So the first part was on the dorms. So basically, as I've kind of said, people flagrantly breaking rules. The second part was on the contact tracing because it was days behind and students who tested positive were staying in the dorms and forced to use the bathrooms or go to dining halls with COVID. And the third is the quarantine. So when students were in quarantine, there were many issues there as well. So part 1, we can see here that this quote, you bring back 5,000 students, no one first in the rules. That's just asking for something to happen. So the big part of this story too is the RAs, who actually we needed to use anonymous sources to get in touch with them because we have strict rules about speaking to the media on our campus. So this really challenged finding sources for this series, really pushed our skills and building trust between sources, and also our journalism ethics and anonymous sources and photos. You will see that one of our pieces, or 2 of our pieces, use videos inside of the quarantine and things like that we worked really intentionally to make sure that we were releasing footage that was definitely ethical. But I think we were able to get this report out because we have built such strong relationships with media relations on campus, with the university, but also with student leaders. We've built credibility at our paper. And also, we can't go and knock on doors in a pandemic. So really pushing that online outreach to find sources as well. So the RAs are really put in a position where they had to go into potentially dangerous environments to break up dorm parties. And there's one kind of quote that kind of sticks out in part 1 where an RA went to write up a student, they said, "You're ruining my college experience." So that was kind of like the feeling from RAs on campus. So part 2, So part two focused on the contact tracing. So as I said, students were stuck in the dorms and when they were positive with COVID, and the university had to bring in the state to help them with contact tracing because they were so overwhelmed. And that kind of led to some other issues, and students who, you know, knew they came in contact with someone, like their roommate tested positive and they were trying to get in contact with the university, like, I need to move into quarantine housing, but they just couldn't get in touch with them. And then there were also some transportation issues where that, because they were so overwhelmed, they were supposed to bring students on a bus or something and they couldn't get them there. So just so many moving pieces of this reporting. So then part three kind of focused on the quarantine. So there's some parties in the quarantine. There were also some cases of students who needed medical equipment, but because the university was so overwhelmed, they never got it. And then alongside that, there's this feeling of loneliness for a lot of students as well, being isolated for 2 weeks and hearing people kind of socializing and choosing to, you know, see each other in quarantine, but being stuck in their room all alone. And then also with the food and other resources, the food was, you know, it was a lot for the university to provide all of these things to students. So it was cold or like inedible at times for students. So there's one student we said who, when he moved into quarantine, went 24 hours without eating because of all of these mess that happened. And then there's one student who said that at first, before the cases were overwhelmed, they were eating very well. But then when there were hundreds of students trying to, the university trying to bring food to, they stopped eating because they just really couldn't like eat it because it was so gross. So it's kind of the perfect storm of a bunch of different issues, but I kind of wanted to talk about the culture on campus that was coming along with our reporting. So there was a huge debate whether, you know, these students, it's the university's fault or it's the students' fault. The administration chose to bring people back, so it's their fault versus, you know, the students are adults, they should know better. And we also wanted to really get the student reactions, you know, because it's important to know, to report in the culture of what's going on your campus. So since then, since the outbreak, cases have fallen. There's a weekend on the UMass campus that a lot of students celebrate that has a lot of heavy drinking called Blarney. And there was a party of 200 students that the university reported was broken up after this. As I said before, there were continuous frat parties and things like that, but after the self-sequester, there's been a decline in cases. And so it wasn't just this series, it was continuations of, you know, following every single thing that was happening, because in that 2-week shutdown period, you know, the university said that people like shouldn't even be going to work, and they moved graduate student families out of their housing. So a lot of people are facing the adverse effects of this outbreak. So I'm just really proud of the work that my news team was able to do to get out all of this information, and it definitely made some big impacts around the state, because UMass is in the Pioneer Valley, Western Massachusetts, and a lot of people can be affected by these outbreaks. You know, schools were shutting down because there was an elevated cases at UMass. So yeah, just as I said at the beginning, I think it really goes to show the importance of student journalism and that we're holding power to account at all times, and making sure that students have the resources they need. And if they don't, we elevate their voices. Yes, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Cassie. Our last presentation is also from UMass Amherst, from the Open with Claire Healy.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here and talk with you all. I'm going to be presenting on a project that I started with friends across the world and at UMass. And it's called The Open. And I'm going to put the website in the chat because I will share my screen and I'll show it, but there's a lot on the website I can't get through. So I hope that it clarifies anything and that you get to explore the website on your own. So I'm going to share my screen and hope that I can find my, here we go. So this is The Open. We are an international multilingual magazine that I started based out of UMass Amherst, but really the goal is to not be centered in any place, but to be really an international collaboration. So right here is our logo. I'm gonna scroll through. and this is our website. So I'm going to go through the website to explain our structure and function after I give a little bit on the background of the project, how it started, who I am, and then I'll go through the writing and the artwork that we're sharing and show you a little bit of our first edition, which Cassie is featured in and will be released hopefully this month. So this is a project that I've been wanting to do since freshman year. I focus a lot internationally, and I felt a lot in college that one of the things that has been lacking is collaboration between international universities, where students can really talk about the issues that we study, the work that we're doing, and work together on global solutions. One of the things that inspired this was climate change for me, which is very global, but we don't really have those channels to exchange work and to talk. And so I study Arabic and Spanish, and the project is entirely functional in English, Arabic, and Spanish. And part of the reason for that is my junior year, I went abroad to Jordan and Cuba, and I found that a lot of my friends that I made there were just as interested in this as me. And so they've really started it with me. And one of the main parts of this project that makes it unique and particularly challenging, but I think it's our greatest asset, is that we have no one central language. So we really rely on each other to communicate. We have translators that help us, and it brings a lot of linguistic diversity, and it means that we have to be constantly working to communicate across different teams when we don't have one common language to do so. And so, as you will see, most of our members who work and our writers are based out of Jordan or Cuba or the United States. This is one of my favorite quotes by Toni Morrison. And so the goal of this project is partially to create community and also to create narrative exchange that can have a powerful impact. So this quote is on our website, which I'm going to go to now. And so if you go to the website, you'll be able to see it's completely translated into Spanish and Arabic. And this was all done by our members. So if you go to community, you will see we have writers, artists, editors, and translators. And so our translators worked like overtime to put the whole website into Spanish and Arabic after I laid it out. And it's all collaborative. So I am entirely in contact with people at every stage, and we've kind of built this up together about what would be the best way to communicate these stories and share this work. We have an upcoming volume, which I will show you a sneak peek of, which is entirely available in English, Spanish, and Arabic. And if you go to stories, we've laid it out in a couple different ways. So right now the stories are broken into global and local, but if we move to a beat system or different themes, that will change. But what that means is that for stories that aren't based in like one specific community, but have a more general focus, like op-eds, they're going to be stored here. So one of the first things that was requested from a lot of members was videos reacting to the US election, which really could show, for example, specifically in Cuba, and a lot of our writers are Palestinian, how the US election had a really global impact and really global reach. So for anyone that's interested, we have here a lot of videos, and they're all translated with subtitles into the different languages. And then please explore the website. But another thing I'll show you is that we have a lot of art. And so this isn't published yet, but these are 2 galleries that we are publishing this week. So one is a spotlight on one artist who is based out of Jordan. She's Palestinian. And this is her work. And then another is a gallery that's kind of summarizing over April, all of our different artists and what they want to share and the work that they've really been doing around one theme. So we'll do that a lot. And a big element of our work is collaboration. So in the future, as we build and go forward, we want to have mutual aid networks and highlight workshops and do partner projects. So one example that we're working towards is a family member of one of our writers in Cuba works with youth in her community around art, and she wants to write about that and share different ways that people can donate to her project or follow her project. And so that would be an example of what could go here. So going back to my presentation, this is our first edition. This is something we've been working on throughout the year. So I was in Cuba when the pandemic broke out, and with my friends who I'd made there, we stayed in touch, and we were seeing how the pandemic was impacting us in different ways and staying in touch as we really tried to navigate through that as students. So I was studying at the University of Havana. The University of Havana had a very different experience than the University of Massachusetts. And so we wanted to highlight that and show different experiences based on the writers and what they want to write about and what they wanted to share. So that will be reflected in this edition, which also has artist spotlights and different ways to follow our artists on Instagram and social media. So this is one of our artists who is based out of Cuba. This is another article. This was originally written in Spanish and it has been translated. And the author wrote about a specific project based at the University of Havana around film and what youth are doing to be innovative in different film projects. And it's one specific project that he spotlighted and did all these interviews for. This is another spotlight of one of our artists. She's amazing. And this is her graphic design, and she works a lot with us on graphic design on our social media. So if you go to our website too, you will find, and I can show this in a second, that we have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And because of the nature of our organization, as we work together to see what works the best, we have our Instagram and social media run by a social media director based here in the United States and another social media director based in Cuba. And we are looking for one who can do the Arabic part. Right now we have an Arabic translator who works with them to make sure everything on our social media is accessible in all 3 languages. But we're hoping to find somebody who can really do that content because social media is different than what we have on our magazine, and we want to make sure it's accessible. And this is an example of another one of our articles. This one is entirely in Spanish, but like I said, they're all going to be entirely translated for the edition, which will be an ebook and hopefully print if we can get it together. But one of the things about this project that we're constantly working through and evolving to meet is it has inherent challenges to certain things that would be possible to do at one university. Like print, for example, is much less accessible in Cuba than it is in UMass Amherst in the United States. And so we have to work around that, and PDF might be the best way to distribute there. So we'll probably be doing that. So thank you for listening. I hope you follow us on social media. And if you go to our website, we have different ways for you to get involved if you would be interested. And we're constantly spotlighting new people. And so with involvement, we have editors, translators. We hope to grow to more languages. And we have, of course, writers and artists. And with artists, that could be visual art. We want to share music as well, because it's really about different ways that people can express themselves and share their work and share their stories. So music, video, anything, and collaborate with different projects as well. So thank you all so much. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Claire. Claire was our last presentation, and so we're going to open it up for questions. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat. I know we have one from Arian, so if you want to ask it, feel free to just unmute, or I can ask it too.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Again, my name is Ariane. And so this is for Claire from the Open. I'm really impressed that you all value being able to cover things in different countries as well as languages. That's something that I never thought about, like being able to just cover everything, even as a student, because I know like sometimes as student journalists, we're undermined and feel like we can't do it, but we actually can. So I'm really impressed. But how do you make those international connections? Like, how did you get to the point of where, I think I want to cover something, even though these people speak Arabic? Like, how did that come about?
Well, first, thank you so much. I'm really flattered. And I think that's why I wanted to start my presentation, so you all could get an idea of who I am and how this started, because I wouldn't have started this if I didn't go abroad and my friends weren't interested there. It's meant to be entirely based in the writers and what they want to drive in their work. So, for example, I mean, how I initially was inspired and wanted to do this, I think is just, I would credit Cambridge and my community and like always being interested in international work. And like I said, I felt like there was a real lack at universities of hearing those voices. Like in my classes, we're studying topics that are so intimate to other people. We're writing about topics that are so intimate to different places internationally, but rarely do we have a conversation with somebody who is also working on that, but on the ground or in a personal sense. So I really wanted just students to be able to have that conversation. And like I said, when I went abroad, I was already studying Arabic and Spanish. And so I did 2 immersive programs at the University of Jordan and then at the University of Havana. And my friends there wanted to do it with me and wanted to build it with me. And the pandemic and this past year, we've just been working on trying to get this out and have had an extra drive to do that because we're all having such different experiences and such intense experiences. And this is a way to share that. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Claire.
We have another question from Kathleen Quinn. Kathleen, if you want to unmute, you feel free to ask it, or I can ask your question too.
Okay. Yeah, so my question is, by the way, it's amazing to have full text that is translated into multiple languages. I think that ideally we would all be there, especially with communities that are multilingual. But has it been a challenge for translators when they're translating from the original text language to maintain the flow and feel of the original piece? Because sometimes certain words don't hit the same way when they're translated from one language to another, and you want to do justice to the original author's flow or sense of space. Has that been a challenge?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked, because that's been one of the most exciting parts of this. We have like a translations department that we're building, and this is all kind of based in my closest friends, and one of my closest friends is the head of translations, and that's like what she studies. Like she focuses in linguistic access and how do you ethically translate topics that are so intimate and so important to the writer and make sure you get their voice. And so this has been a challenge, specifically with poetry. Translating poetry is so difficult. But I think that goes to the nature of the people involved. Like, it's a constant conversation. So if an editor or translator has a concern about one word, they can go to the writer, they can go to someone else and ask for help and ask for translation. And through that, we're all learning. Like that's a big part of this. I want to make, like, in the future, language partnerships for people who want to improve different linguistic abilities. And so that's kind of in the drive of the people who are working on this, who are so passionate and amazing. But it is a challenge, especially with Arabic, because, for example, one of our conversations was our name is the Open, but that's in English letters. And if we write it phonetically in Arabic, there is no P in Arabic. Most P becomes an F or a B. So one writer suggested that we call ourselves Iftah Alami, like the Open International in Arabic, and make an Arabic edition. So that's an entirely different conversation. But I think, to answer your question, it just has to be a conversation. Otherwise, something's going to be lost.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Kathleen, for your question. Our next question is from Madalyn Amato from the Daily 49er. Go ahead, Madalyn.
Yeah, thank you. This is kind of to anyone who wants to answer, but what do you guys think about killing print? Do we need a print? obviously, since no one's on campus here at Long Beach, we haven't been printing. We've been doing a digital issue on issue.com. It's like essentially a PDF version of it. But, you know, we're looking at a lot of challenges of like money and pay. And as we all know, printing is very expensive. So, you know, how do we need a print product? We've been able to keep our communities, you know, informed in a totally digital format. So, you know, as we're preparing to come back in the fall in person, I mean, I'm graduating, but you know, my, you know, paper looking to come back, do we need a print product?
Ariane and Casey, you have your hands raised. So Ariane, why don't you go first, and then Cassie.
Yes, thank you so much. My answer is very short. So I'm in the same predicament as you, Madalyn. But then someone pointed out to me that, like, how are homeless people going to get the news? Older folks who may not be so tech savvy, because just like you, we do have a PDF version. And so I always think about those people. So while I'm proud to have my work be physical and be able to hold it, I do think that if we do continue printing, if we bring printing back on campus post pandemic, I do think it should be reserved and kind of limited for people who don't have the same kind of resources, because I'm privileged to have 2 laptops, a cell phone, an iPad, a tablet, but everyone doesn't have that. And so if we do bring printing back, I would want to save it for people who don't have those resources.
Yeah, just going off of that, I was going to say accessibility over everything. And I think that's kind of what it comes back to. Not that I will ever miss fighting with InDesign at 2 in the morning. I think though, what we've seen on our campus is like, we have more readership like online, and we would have such a surplus of paper copies. And I think part of it is because we're leaving them around campus. But we reach the extended community, and you know, maybe a college student might be more likely to use the device, not every college student. But I think where we need papers is maybe out in the broader community. I think, like you said, though, there's like the funding that we've saved an incredible amount of money, been able to pay more people now because we're not printing. So I think we keep kind of coming back to the theme of these conversations and kind of doing it all with an individual situation and thinking strategically about what's the best way to make our information the most accessible. I just, as much as I wanted to put my senior column on my graduation cap, I don't think that it's the most important. It's just not the most important thing, I think, because even videos, students are more likely maybe to watch a video online. And sorry, lastly, the collegiate translates into 13 different languages, which we wouldn't be able to do in print. So that's another really huge component, I think.
Go ahead, Megan. I see that you have your hand raised too.
Yeah, just wanted to talk like specifically from our experience. No one gets paid here, and I think that has created an accessibility barrier for those type of people who could actually come and join, because it is such a huge time commitment. So stopping printing has really kind of opened up the possibility of perhaps we can offer some sort of like work study program. There's a few editors here who are working, you know, many hours a week on top of this, and it's just really not sustainable. And I think being able to save money and perhaps maybe give the metro section a little bit of a budget to go out and like do more things around Boston, or just being able to at least sponsor like a few work study positions, I think has kind of expanded our ability to like diversify our newsrooms in like various different ways. So although I am so sentimental about being able to pick up a copy, you know, walking out in the morning and seeing what you stayed up until 3 a.m. making on InDesign, it's just given us new opportunities that I think we, you know, when push came to shove, like we had to prioritize over sentimentality.
Hannah, go ahead. I see you have your hand raised too.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think like the physical limitations of the paper like do have a lot to bear on like the content that's produced. Like for the Crimson staff editorials, I've spent I think almost like a majority of my time on the Crimson when, you know, during the pandemic. So like we've Like I was the staff editorials editor, and I didn't even know that like our staff editorials were supposed to be like a max, like 550 words, like hard max, because of like the physical limitations of the paper. But just in the digital environment, like we've been able to, I think, really expand what like a staff editorial can be, like make them like, I feel like by making them a bit longer, we've been able to enrich them, and that's something that we just couldn't do with a physical paper. And we are very set to like, we publish 3 opinion pieces a day, and this is where they go in InDesign. But I think that like having the flexibility that digital allows to like to publish less and to publish, I think, like better, has been so I think that's something that digital can give you. I wouldn't want to, I mean, I really like print, I think, for accessibility reasons, but also like yeah, I don't know, like killing print freaks me out a bit, but I do think part of that's sentimental. But yeah, I think in the future, I think taking the lessons that we've learned from going like digital only and maintaining that, and like really leaning into the strengths of digital is like the path forward.
Aidan, I see you have your hand raised, so you go ahead, and then we're gonna move on to our last question.
Okay, yeah. For me, I think it's one of those things that depends on the readership. But a lot of college papers have college readers, which have shown that constantly there's 25% of the population that goes, which means that depending on the size of the student population, local businesses would then do spend a lot of money on attracting that freshman cohort every year, which is a lot of money that could go through printed advertisements, which are known to work better than digital advertisements. So it's one of those things where it's like kind of depends on the local business environment. But I think in some cases, for some papers, the better solution to the businesses is to ramp up ads, which have never been really easy to sell advertisements, but sometimes that's more of a solution than killing off the print revenue in addition to the print cost. And again, it depends on the location though.
Okay. Our last question is from Hana, so feel free to unmute and ask.
Also, this doesn't matter, but it's Hana. I'm
Sorry.
trying to get better. No, you're good. We almost have the same name, so I feel like that must be like confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so my question's for Arion. So I'm also from Tallahassee. I don't know if you're from Tallahassee, but I in trying to like do some local reporting, I found that I've had a difficult time getting like official sources to speak with me. So people like people involved with like the Tallahassee Police Department, or like local politicians. And I was just wondering how the FAMUAN approached sourcing there, particularly when you're trying to hold those people to account, and like I don't know, tips and tricks you have there. Great.
Okay, so one time for Tallahassee okay. So I really love answering this question. One thing that my old editor-in-chief installed in me, I was a freshman, she was interviewing me. She was like, okay, what do you do when you have an interview and they don't pick up? So I'm scared. I'm like, I don't know. And she was like, you keep calling them. She was like, this is your job. Like, you need an answer. And so as journalists, we always have to be curious and question everything. So you keep pressing them. And then my advice that I give to my staff is like, somebody is going to talk. Like, somebody's going to talk. So, Tallahassee police chief might not talk, but his secretary might. A police officer might, and they may give you even better information. But also, we've had those stories where we really can't get those official sources. But luckily, we have the Tallahassee Democrat. They have a huge database, and they're kind of like our their publication kind of acts as like our parents. When we can't get something, they definitely can. So we kind of lean on them as well. And that's where a bunch of this gun information came from as well. Like they have an entire visualization board of data and stuff. And then also I think just really having a supportive advisory council and professor staff behind you. Like, these professors, luckily I've had some really great ones. They're here to help you. And plus they have connections. So I always know I can call my advisor and be like, this dude is not picking up. I need you to call him. He'd be like, I got it. I'm on it. And so he gets the information for me. So I think just having a supportive staff and really standing on it, like, this is my job. I need to answer. Somebody is going to talk to me. And at the end of the day, you're going to fulfill your job and get this information out that's important to people. So that's my advice. And then just basically look out for Tallahassee Democrat is a huge, huge help. So we definitely depend on them for a lot when we can't get someone to pick up the phone or give us a straightforward answer. And thank you, Hana.
That just about wraps up our session. Thank you so much, everybody. I think just by looking at the chat, like, all the presentations here have given everyone a couple of things to think about. It's definitely given me some like story ideas, and I have some things percolating. So please feel free, like, please expect to hear from me. And thank you so much again for joining us in the session, for joining us at the Georges conference. I'm gonna